in a world that's just, well, absolutely flooded with information, right? Everywhere you look, every click, every scroll, there's this deluge of data, facts, endless knowledge streams. But here's a thought for you. With all this stuff at our fingertips, why does real wisdom, true understanding, often feel so hard to find? What's the actual difference between just knowing a lot and having that deeper wisdom? And how do we even get there?
That really is the key question, isn't it? It's something that the material we're looking at today really digs into. What does wisdom actually mean?
Exactly, and that's what we're exploring. Today we're taking a deep dive into the concept of wisdom, and we're doing it through the lens of some really powerful ancient teachings from the book of Proverbs, chapter 3 specifically.
Yeah, and our sources for this, they're quite rich. They really unpack these verses. They give us some pretty profound insights into, well, divine instruction, the benefits of trusting something bigger than our own, limited understanding, and even how discipline fits into growth. What I find fascinating is how it connects these ancient ideas to, like, really concrete situations, things like global mission work, even the roots of Jewish faith.
Yeah.
It's quite wide-ranging.
Right. So our mission in this deep dive is pretty clear. We want to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights from these sources, basically give you a shortcut to understanding what real wisdom looks like, why it's so important, and how it can genuinely shape your life, your choices. So, okay, if wisdom's this valuable, where do we start? Proverbs 3 opens kind of intimately, right? A father talking to his son, what's the very first thing he tells him? The first step to wise living.
Well, the instruction is quite direct, isn't it? It's, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments. That's verse 1. Now, the law here, Torah, it means the Father's teaching, but it's clearly based on God's law. And the critical thing really isn't just memorizing rules, it's about internalizing them. Making them part of your character deep down. This was apparently super important in ancient Israel, and the point is made that it's just as vital today for parents teaching, for kids learning.
Okay, internalizing it, not just knowing it. And what are the benefits? What does the text promise if you actually do this heartfelt obedience?
Well, the promise is pretty significant. It says, for length of days and long life and peace shall they add to thee. That's verse 2. And peace there, the word is shalom, which means much more than just, quietness. It's wholeness, prosperity, health, overall well-being. But it's presented as a general principle. Like, this is the natural result of living wisely. It's not some rigid guarantee. The source notes, sometimes good kids die young, tragically. But generally, people who follow these paths find a quality of life the foolish just don't experience.
That clarification is important, the general principle idea, because life throws curveballs. Right. Okay, so beyond keeping commands, the text also points to two really key virtues, mercy and truth. It says, let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck. Write them upon the table of thine heart. That's verse 3. That imagery, bind them about thy neck, write them on your heart. What does that tell us about these qualities?
It's incredibly vivid, isn't it? Mercy is about loyalty, especially in a covenant relationship. Think faithfulness. And truth speaks to trustworthiness, reliability. So binding them around your neck, maybe like a necklace or one of those cylinder signets they used, it means they should be visible, a public part of who you are. And writing them on the table of thine heart, that means they become intrinsic, part of your very nature. They're meant to be with you always, defining who you are, not just actions, but identity.
Visible and intrinsic. I like that. So if you live this way, embodying mercy and truth, what's the outcome?
The reward mentioned is favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man. That's verse 4. Favor means, well, a good disposition towards you from God and from people. And good understanding is about prudence, practical wisdom, good sense. Now, this isn't saying your main goal should be just, getting popular or building a reputation. That can be shallow. It's more that if you live with integrity, people and God will generally recognize it. Even enemies won't really have solid ground to accuse you. It's a reputation that comes naturally from character.
Okay, this next part, for me, is where it gets really interesting. We shift from honoring a father's teaching to this huge call. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. Verse 5, that second part. Lean not unto thine own understanding. Why is that so incredibly hard for us?
It's a massive point. Because our own understanding is, by definition, limited, finite. Trusting God with all your heart means relying on Him completely without holding back. Even when, maybe especially when, His ways don't make logical sense to our human minds. Our wisdom, however smart we think we are, it's always, always less than God's perfect wisdom. The source uses a great illustration. You can't fit the ocean in a teacup. And we shouldn't expect our finite minds to fully grasp an infinite God.
That's a really powerful image, the ocean and the teacup. It puts things in perspective. And it makes sense why we crave certainty, often looking for it ourselves. The sources even bring up this report about more people apparently consulting psychics about money during tough economic times. That feels like a very literal example of leaning on your own understanding, or at least not on God's. Well, what's the fundamental danger there, and what's the alternative path Proverbs points to?
Well, the danger is putting yourself, your limited, flawed self, at the center instead of God. It leads to decisions based on fear or bad information or maybe wishful thinking or even deception like with psychics. Proverbs offers the better way. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. That's verse 6. Acknowledging God isn't just, a Sunday thing. It means recognizing his authority, his presence, his lordship in every part of life, social life, work, politics, everything. And when we do that, truly do that, the promise is he'll make our path straight or smooth them out, removing obstacles, helping us avoid those self-inflicted problems that often come from relying only on ourselves.
Okay, so acknowledging him in all ways, that leads right into the next warning. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. Verse 7. Now, feeling the Lord, that phrase can sound a bit intimidating, maybe even negative to some ears. What does that fear really mean here? And why is it the antidote to being wise in your own eyes?
Right. It's not about being scared of God in a terrified way. It's about reverence, awe. It comes from grasping just how transcendent, how holy, how utterly magnificent God is. And that kind of awe, that reverence, is the perfect cure for self-importance, for thinking our own wisdom is sufficient. When you glimpse God's majesty, there's just no room left for puffing yourself up. And this healthy fear has a direct result. You depart from evil. They're linked. Godly fear, reverence, leads to righteous living. It brings accountability.
That makes sense. It's like getting the right perspective. It's humbling, but in a good way, especially today when there's so much focus on, self-promotion. How does this ancient idea offer maybe a more liberating humility? And what are the tangible benefits? What happens when we have this reverence and turn from evil?
The text uses really earthy imagery. It shall be health to thy navel and marrow to thy bones, verse 8, which basically promises holistic well-being, from the outside in, navel to bone marrow, physical and mental health. And the source material points out this link between spiritual health and physical health. It's widely recognized now, even in medicine. We all know stress is bad for the body. The text even cites things like STDs as examples of how ignoring godly ways harms body and soul. So obedience, this kind of wise living, generally leads to better health, a longer, more peaceful life. It's about flourishing.
Right, a holistic flourishing. And beyond our attitudes and health, there's a very practical call too. Honor the Lord with thy substance, and with the firstfruits of all thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. Verses 9 and 10, firstfruits. That sounds pretty ancient agricultural. How does that principle, honoring God with our best, the first part, translate for us today? How is that an act of trust?
Yeah, firstfruits is fundamentally about acknowledging that everything we have comes from God. It's his first. But it's more than just, say, ticking a box for tithing. It's about prioritizing God with our best right off the top, not just leftovers. It's a tangible way to show we trust him to provide for the rest, even when maybe finances feel tight. For the Israelites, it was literal first crops. For us, the principle holds, honoring God financially with our time, our talents, giving our best first. And the promise isn't necessarily you'll get rich quick. It's more that God will meet our needs and give us enough so we can keep being generous. It demonstrates our faith that he'll keep providing. It's trust in action.
Okay, but that brings up a tough question, and one I think many people wrestle with. What happens when life isn't smooth? When health fails or finances don't improve? How do we square hardship with a loving, guiding God, especially when the text itself says, "My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as a father the son in whom he delighteth." That's verses 11 and 12.
This is such a crucial part of trust. And yeah, it can be really challenging. Chastening here, the word means correction for instruction, for growth, leading to change. It's very different from punishment or vengeance. So when hard times hit, the text says, hey, consider the possibility, not always the case, but a possibility that God might be using this to teach you something, to refine you.
If God loves us, why take us through hardship? That feels almost contradictory sometimes.
Well, that's the paradox the source highlights, isn't it? It's precisely because God loves us, because we're precious to him, that he takes the trouble to correct and refine us. Think about it. A loving parent wouldn't let their toddler play with knives, right? Our loving father doesn't just let us wander into harmful patterns or sin without intervening. It's not that he enjoys the discipline, but he does it out of love. In fact, discipline is shown as proof that we're his legitimate children. Hebrews 12 talks about this too, verses 5 to 11. It's ultimately for our good, to build righteousness in us. It's a reminder, maybe especially for young people, that discipline from good parents or God isn't just punishment, it's guidance. And for adults, it challenges that idea that wisdom just comes with age. No, true wisdom keeps seeking God's guidance even when it's uncomfortable correction.
It's really fascinating how these ancient principles, honoring teaching, trusting God, accepting correction, keep showing up across time and cultures. Let's shift gears a bit and look at how these ideas play out in some real-world examples mentioned in our sources. First, the Jewish connection.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. Proverbs 3.3, that instruction to bind mercy and truth around his neck and write them upon his heart's tablet. It immediately brings to mind the Shema, which is, arguably, Judaism's most important prayer. Its name comes from the first Hebrew word, hear. It's actually made up of a few Old Testament bits, but most famously Deuteronomy 6.4 and 9, which commands the Israelites to love God with everything, heart, soul, and might,
Yeah.
and to bind his instructions to themselves, like literally wearing fringes on clothes as constant reminders.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just a nice idea, it's deeply embedded in practice. How central is the Shema?
Oh, incredibly central. It has a really long, vital history. By the early centuries AD, it was recited daily. And today, many rabbis introduce it saying, this is the key to our faith.
Yeah.
It's totally essential in Jewish practice, morning and evening prayers, synagogue services, even on Yom Kippur during the final Nila prayer. It really embodies that call to internalize God's commands, make them part of daily life.
And there's a direct link to the New Testament too, right? Bridging these traditions.
Absolutely. In Mark chapter 12, a scribe asks Jesus what the most important commandment is. And Jesus quotes Deuteronomy 6.4 to 5, the absolute core of the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. He says, this is the first commandment. So the fact that both Jews and Christians hold the Shema in such high regard, the source suggests this makes it fertile ground for evangelism, showing its enduring importance across faiths.
Okay, so from ancient roots to very modern challenges, that principle of trust the Lord shows up powerfully in tough places today too. The sources tell this compelling story from North Africa. A Muslim country, missionary work band, trying to convert someone is illegal. How on earth does the message get through in a place like that?
Well, it's pretty remarkable. Despite, intense spiritual opposition and legal danger, mission groups have seen amazing things. Like almost 15 years back, there were apparently 60 underground churches in just one of these nations. The outreach started, interestingly, with radio, medium wave AM radio, beaming signals in from outside. But then as tech changed, they adapted. Added an Arabic website back in '98, then a TV studio in 2000, using satellite TV, FM radio, the internet, whatever channels they could find. It shows real persistence.
And it's not just about the tech, is it? There's a huge human cost, a real willingness to sacrifice involved. That seems key.
Exactly. The source emphasizes that the Holy Spirit moved former Muslims, now believers, to join the ministry, people willing to risk their actual lives for this work. I mean, the risks from police informants are extreme, yet their faithful work led to this underground church movement. There are powerful testimonies quoted, like a letter starting, "Your brother Abdul," saying, "After I became a Christian, my life was changed. I have peace." Another person finding their website while searching online from a Muslim country. And the outreach center itself faces attacks, hackers, extremists, yet they keep going. They're even reaching, apparently, Spanish teenagers who are often indifferent to religion. It's quite something.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? When you see that kind of perseverance, facing such huge personal risk, technological hurdles, what does that tell us about the sheer power of trusting in a wisdom far beyond our own? Especially when everything seems stacked against you, when logic might just say, stop, it's too dangerous. So we've really taken a deep dive into Proverbs chapter 3 today. We've unpacked how honoring instruction, really trusting God's direction with everything, and even learning from his loving correction, how these are foundational for true wisdom, for a genuinely fulfilling life. And we've seen these ancient ideas pop up everywhere, from historical Jewish practices like the Shema to these incredible modern stories of faith in action globally. It shows their lasting power, doesn't it?
It really does. And remember, wisdom isn't just knowing a lot of facts. It's the ability, the skill to apply knowledge toward useful, right, and lasting goals. Ultimately, it's an attribute of God himself and of those who are rightly connected to him. The source material makes the point here, noting that, today's society, the media, and many politicians trying to redefine right and wrong. And it advises that we should be respectful of others without abandoning the truth. That's a tricky balance sometimes.
That is a tricky balance. And it leads to a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe mull over. Considering everything we've talked about, those core principles of mercy and truth from Proverbs, and especially not leaning on your own understanding, how might these guide you personally? Especially when you face conflicting views or maybe societal pressures that push against what you believe is true? How can these ancient insights actually empower you to discern truth, stand firm in it, but do so respectfully towards others? Something to think about until our next deep dive.